Last in line, nation, welcome to another episode. We are in the hot month of June, and we are going through this outline called What's Your Wake? WAKE. The weakness, the asset, the kickstand, and the expectation. So, we've got a good guest today from a different time zone. I like that. We've got a guy who from Pennsylvania right here. Mark Benedetti is a CPA with 15 years experience in the auditing, tax, and corporate accounting world. He's currently a controller for a transportation company where he's a leader of 10 other folks. Get into some of his leadership here in a little bit. He's an active entrepreneur. So he and his wife are kind of got their hands in a lot of different things. They own a franchise with some friends of theirs that's a donut franchise called Peace, Love, and Little Donut. And then various rental properties. In fact, his wife is starting to do some financial coaching as well. And they just have a heart for seeing people get free in the area of finances. And so that's really awesome to have him today. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here, and it's an honor to be a guest with you this morning.
Yeah. Hey, I got to say, the background, did you paint that? That's really nice. I love your
No,
work.
no chance. I
Okay,
don't know who painted
so
it. I don't know where it came from. It just showed up there one day.
we're not going to get into any artistic side of you then. We might get into some
No,
numbers crunching side of you, but
that's right.
no, so from a leadership standpoint, like we are not shy about talking about this platform's about servant leadership and right out of the Bible in Mark 9:35 where it says to be first, one must be last of all and servant of all. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is how we are leaders, how we prop others up, not to spoiler alert the kickstand portion of this, but Mark, we talk about wake. It's a fancy word. It's kind of weird to talk about wake. We don't stand in the grocery store line and say, "Hey, man, what's your wake?" Much. So wake is what we leave behind us, what kind of trail we're blazing, so to speak, and we're going to break this word down, and we're going to get dirty first. We're going to get our hands dirty in the word of weakness. So nobody wants to talk about that. In fact, we can't talk about that now. In schools, teachers can't talk about kids' weaknesses. We can't do it
Sure.
as coaches on baseball teams. It's not about everybody gets a trophy. So, but in your case, I'm sorry to say we're going to talk about your weakness real quick.
Good.
So, why are we first? Let's talk about why we're afraid to admit weakness, why we run away from vulnerability and transparency. Talk about things just in general with weakness.
Yeah, I think it might be different for each person as far as why they might be afraid to talk about their own weaknesses. And I think you touched on it. It takes a person that's willing to be vulnerable. And I think that comes with a level of self-security and self-confidence to identify, okay, I might be good in these areas and I might be weak in some others, and that's okay. Like, that's not necessarily a dig on me or somebody's trying to like, John, you're not trying to like knock me down off my pedestal so you can climb up. So I think it takes some self-security and being vulnerable
Yeah.
and somebody that's willing to change and maybe hear something they don't want to hear so they can improve and be better. I mean, I grew up playing sports. I know that you're active in sports, and isn't that how good players get better? Is
Right.
they want to get better. They see that they're not already, insert Tiger Woods or the best basketball, Steph Curry, whoever that person may be. So like, I need to get better. I need to know what I need to practice, improve on, work on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if we're, focused through that lens of making others better around us, then it's, at times we need to self check and self evaluate and really kind of hone in on those areas where we do have the most potential for growth, to be more
Mm-hmm.
politically correct, not necessarily
Yeah.
our weakness. But, what are some areas for you that you've had to really kind of lean into and really acknowledge and sort of like get in the mirror and get real with yourself and say, okay, in order to be better at what I want to be better at, here's what I need to look at.
Yeah, I think honestly, my walk with the Lord, it talks about in John that He is the vine, that we are the branches, and that He prunes back things in us so
Mm,
that we can be even more fruitful. Well, you're not going to prune a branch if it's not a weak branch.
mm,
And so I think my relationship with the Lord is the foundation of that, that we have to give God full rights and full ability to prune anything in me that isn't a reflective nature of Jesus ultimately. And so I think that's one. And so, all the time, whether that's on a Sunday morning service as pastors giving the message, or in my quiet time, and he puts his finger on something, that's a weakness or an area that I need to strengthen or have a better foundation in so that I can uh, escalate my walk with him and grow closer to Jesus. And um, I think that was illustrated to me a couple of years ago when I started writing the book that I authored, The Potential Trap, was that I was vulnerable. I knew that I wasn't there yet. There's some things in me that needed to change, and I needed direction. So I needed to know where to go, and I needed to know how to excel wherever that destination was. So I needed his help with everything. And he helped me along the way. He tells us um, in the book of Isaiah that he is the Lord that directs us where to go and teaches us how to prosper, how to profit. Um, and so I subjected myself to his teaching and his direction. And he showed me some things. Okay, work on this. You need to learn these skills, these real life skills, but also you need to work on these things internally to help me down that path, this new path that he was taking me on of writing the book that I wrote.
yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's why I didn't really mention it in the intros, because when we get into this area of weakness and self-improvement and just kind of analyze within ourselves, talk about your book called The Potential Trap. So what kind of led you to go down that
Yeah.
path?
Yeah, and it's I think something maybe we'll talk about later, but I was around people. We have a mutual friend, and I was around this person who was challenging me, and we were asking each other questions of, man, what's God have for me? I feel like there's so much more. I'm just
Mhm.
scratching the surface of the potential that is within me, that's God given. And we want to contribute, we want to maximize our value, we want to maximize our value to other people. Like, could I be helping and serving other people in a way that I'm not currently doing? And so I was really seeking God. Jesus talks about asking, seeking, and knocking, and I was
Yeah.
doing that through
Mhm.
fasting and prayer, and asking these questions that we were just talking about. And I'll never forget it. I was praying one day. Happened to be in our church at like lunch break, and I felt like God gave me questions to ask myself, talking about identifying weaknesses, but also identifying strengths, and
Yeah.
ask me these questions. Ask me, what are you skilled with? What are you passionate about?
Yeah.
And then the homework assignment was, because that stuff is, I mean, it's not easy, but it's a little bit more in the forefront of your mind maybe. But then the real key question was, okay, now if you can identify where your skills intersect with your passions,
Yeah.
and if you can double down in that area and invest in that area, that's where you are the most valuable, not only to myself, but to other people around me. And so it was that process of introspective thinking and processing and doing some self-analysis, and that led me to write the book. And I talk about that in the book, and how God
Yeah.
led me through that process. But it was really that process of, there's a weakness or this perceived weakness. So I go to God for it to see how he can bring strength to that area of weakness.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that, because when you're talking about, gifts and talents and passion, and aligning those with your passion, and then walking those out and determining the actions to take down the road that really has an impact on other people. Because I think that's where we
Mm-hmm.
miss it sometimes. And I haven't read your book yet, but the trap of the potential, we kind of get locked in that. Well, okay, I identified my strengths. I know what I'm passionate about. Okay, cool. And we don't go, the action part,
Mm-hmm.
activating what we're getting, those things down
Yeah.
the road is where people I think miss it. So did you learn any lessons along the way about, or anything about yourself that you learned that surprised you, and then any
Yeah.
lessons down the road that you've learned?
Yeah, the thing that I learned that kind of surprised me, and this was at the onset of it, was um, so as you said in the intro, I'm a CPA. I do accounting work, and that's my career and what my career has been in. And I really started to think, how did I get to where I am? Well, I got to the job I'm in from the job before, from the job before, from the job before, from college, from declaring a major. And it's like I started to go backwards in time, and I realized, am I, or ask myself the question, am I where I am because of a decision I made when I was 19 years old to declare a major in college?
Yeah.
Declared accounting, graduated accounting, got an accounting job, progressed through the accounting world, and like, man, am I really where I'm at because of a 19-year-old version of me and what he thought was
Wow.
best for me at, at that point? And it wasn't a bad
Yeah.
decision. Like, I'm very content. I'm very grateful. God has blessed me enormously. But I think it's a healthy exercise to go through as I matured. Certainly, I think we should all do this. Life changes, family situations change. Okay, what is the best thing for me now?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think, I even love your wake analogy because, a wake has a rhythm to it. Like you think about the ocean, there's a current
Yep.
to the waves. And I think sometimes we get caught in a current and
Yep.
then we're just gone. And you're like, have you ever float in the ocean and
Right.
then you realize like
You look
my
up.
beach chair is like half a
Right.
mile over that way. I think that's what happens in life. We get into something, we get caught in a current, and then it just moves us. And
Yeah.
we are not directing our life as much as maybe we should.
Yeah. I love that. No, it's, and I love going to the beach. So you're speaking my language when you're talking. You're making me want to start making reservations. But no, yeah, you look up one day and you think, how did I get here? And I
Yeah,
like what you said about how you backed into that by tracing back your steps of a 19-year-old declaring a major. I think sometimes we get into this place of comfort, like as a young kid. I think, okay, it just kind of stands to reason I'll get a business degree. Okay, well,
mhm,
just from there, I just default into sales. Okay, from there, then I bounce around sales jobs, right, for more money. And this is just the
yeah,
natural progression of things instead of, I wish someone would have said, hey, don't get too comfortable. Like, figure out what you want to be good at and why you want to do that, and then go
mhm,
after it. And it may not be an easy road. Like, I think we sometimes take that road that just seems like natural progression. So,
yeah,
yeah, that was I guess that's my weakness, is that I just kind of went down that road that seemed path of least resistance so I could get a job and then just kind of
yeah,
settle down. So as we go into wake, the A portion is, now we're going to get happy. Okay. We depress the audience with weakness, and no, that was good. But our asset, right? So our asset, like, what drives Mark? What's Mark good at? What have you seen God kind of develop in you over the years that you're like, oh, that's an aha moment for me, right? I have this that
mhm,
I can do this with.
yeah. And I talk about this in the book, and develop identifying our skills, because I think we have to think more broadly about ourselves. So I'll put it in this way. I've been asked over the years from time to time to speak on a Sunday morning, and like deliver the message if the pastor's out of town. I actually had the opportunity last Sunday to do so at our church. And so I was thinking about that, and like, I really like speaking. I really like public speaking. I really like that aspect of it. And so I started thinking, okay, now why do I like that? Well, I like connecting with people. But what is it about connecting with people? Because a casual conversation, like that doesn't, I don't love like just going around and meeting strangers for like five
Right.
minute conversations. Well, I like maybe helping people or seeing people grow. Well, why is that? Because I like when I hear something or learn something, then can communicate it and help somebody with that.
Yeah.
Okay. But then I really got down to the core of it is I really like learning something, putting it through the filter of me and how I think and how I communicate, and then creating content to be delivered
Mm.
so that somebody benefits from my experience or what I've already learned. And so I got down to that content creation, and I was really stuck on, audio, video, verbal. And I thought, well, why should I be hemmed into one aspect of content delivery,
Yeah.
which then opened up the ability to write and deliver written content. And so, but I think the skill ultimately is the content creation and delivery. The vehicle could be a podcast, it could be, live in person, or it could be written. And so I think that asset and drilling down, getting down from like that top layer of, I like doing this. Okay, why? Okay, why? Okay, why? And then you get down to the core and you see how that core skill could be delivered, or how you could create value from that skill in multiple different ways. And that's ultimately, I think that's God giving me insight of how to know that. But I think that is right now the asset that I want to try to maximize in my life.
Yeah. And that's, yeah, you and I are very similar in that regard. I've kind of gone down the same thought process before that you just described. And that's kind of how I got here. And, I tell people all the time, the COVID quarantine and all that really was, I know people have lost a lot during that, but I consider that in my life somewhat of a blessing to have that opportunity forced me to sit down and examine what you just talked about. And then I wrote the book, and then I wrote another one, and then I did this podcast. So, I mean, there's just so much in there, and it kind of, I don't know, it's sad to think if COVID hadn't happened, would I be doing this? Like, what would I still be trapped in the potential trap that you talk about in your book? Like, I would still be stuck, maybe not, but maybe, because I feel like I've had a book in me for more than just a year or two, and I haven't done it. So, okay, talk about that. So let's peel back the layer of that conversation a little bit. And the next point of this is, so talking about assets, why are people? What prevents us from really locking into that and getting to the place where you did, where you talked about, okay, why, and drilling in kind of past that hard surface level? What prevents people to do that? And you have any pointers or any insight for people to get them kind of push through that roadblock?
Yeah, and I think for me, it was identifying, having a vision for myself outside of what I could see, and even project down the path of like my accounting career. And okay, well, if things go well, maybe this will happen, this will be good, or I could work towards this. And I started to, through reading God's word, see that, man, it seemed like God's vision for me was way bigger than mine. And in fact, Ephesians chapter 3 tells us exactly that more than we could ask, think, or imagine are his thoughts towards us and his plans for us. Like, man, God has all. So it seems like God's not limiting me, that I'm limiting God's work in me. So to expand the vision of myself, we have to be content and grateful for what's in our lives, because you start complaining, that is a dangerous, bad path to go down. But that doesn't mean that our contentedness should be prospective and speculate what we should be content about moving forward. Because the Bible also tells us this, as high as the heavens are above the earth, so are his thoughts about us and for us greater than ours. So there should be a drive to achieve, a drive for greatness. And I don't think that is, being greedy or lacking content. I think it's actually fulfilling God's purpose and his plan for me. If you think about what could God do through me if I was at a 10 times higher level than what I was, as far as how I could bless people and give and serve people. What if I was able to help people with different books and different avenues in a much greater capacity? So now if I can see that the ultimate endpoint of this achievement isn't me, but it is in fact reaching the world, then it starts to make sense. It starts to align, like, oh, well, yeah, that's why God would want to do it, is because there's a hurting world that needs people to invest in them, people to love them, people to feed them. So
that's awesome. And man, I'm glad you said contentment, because for the audience that's listening, I think that's one big barrier, is comfort, contentment. We alluded to that earlier, but I like how you kind of compartmentalize the context of that word, because it's not it's not a bad thing to be content in what you've been given and be grateful,
Yeah.
but it can actually become a barrier if you let it get you
Yeah.
really complacent, right? Contentment can lead to complacency, and then comfort and all those words. But yeah, I think
What's
that's great. Go ahead.
what I was gonna say, what's the quote that often the enemy of greatness isn't bad, it's just good. Because you
Good.
can
Yeah.
get lulled to sleep in good. And
Yeah,
it's like, listen, this
absolutely.
is good. Why do I need things to change? It's good. Well, you'll never be great if you don't graduate from good to great.
Yeah, yeah. And we box God in when we box ourselves
Yeah.
in. And like you said, he's got more for us than we even know. And so I think
Yeah.
the other takeaway for the audience too is when you're identifying this and figuring out how to activate what you feel like your passions and your gifts are, it's got to be for a cause bigger than you. It's got to be
Yeah.
for somebody else and to impact somebody else around you, not just for your good. So, man, that's
Yeah.
good insight. I like that. Yeah, so going to the next one here of what's your wake. So the kickstand portion is, so a kickstand we all know on a bicycle, motorcycle, whatever, props it up, keeps it from falling over. So we as people, as leaders, I believe in servant leadership, kickstand, if we could be that for somebody, that's huge. That's vital because it helps them be propped up and move toward more of their calling, their destiny, their purpose. Just, talk about healthy accountability, healthy support system. And I think you were going to go into it a minute ago, but I think you probably go into it with your book about people around you. So talk about
Yeah.
kickstand and you for somebody or somebody for you in that regard.
Yeah. And I think you need both ultimately.
Yeah,
The Bible says as iron sharpens iron, one person has to sharpen
right.
another. And so that process of sharpening, you think about, let's think about just that verse. So you take like a knife or a blade or an axe or something that needs sharpened. Well, it's not able to fulfill its purpose or maximize its purpose or its value if it's not sharp. And that sharpening comes from both friction and the correct amount of pressure.
Yeah,
And I think we can go too far in either direction on both, where we say, some people are like, give me all the pressure, give me all the pressure. Well, you put too much pressure on something, it'll snap it, it'll break it.
yeah,
You apply no pressure and you just avoid it at all costs, well, you're going to be dull. Um, there's too much heat, it's going to, melt and distort
yeah,
the metal. And if there's no heat, it can't be effective. And so I think we have to find that balance, and find people in our lives and give them permission to challenge us to, kind of create those uncomfortable feelings inside of us of like, man, I need to start doing this. Or like, I've seen now every office rerun twice over. Maybe I should stop doing that and start investing in, you know, myself in some way. And so I think we have to allow that. And then to your point, we have to try to be that for somebody else, because it's this process of, like if you've ever seen a lake that gets stagnant, it's because water comes in or settles in and has no outflow, and it just becomes stagnant and like, it's dead. It's gross. So there has to be an inflow and an outflow of what we're learning, what we're improving, and I'm going to pass that on and try to help somebody else.
yeah. And to your point, the Dead Sea is a picture of what you just described. The
Yeah.
the salt content is like 80% or something ridiculous because there's no current, there's no outflow, there's no outlet. It just Nothing lives in the Dead Sea, of course. Great name. But no, it's because stuff flows in and nothing flows out. And like I mean, that's perfect because we can't be good for somebody else if we're just kind of bottled up within ourselves. And we've got to have that perspective though. Like it's got to be bigger than us. I keep going back to that, but it's valid because as we grow, if we're that for somebody, like that's
Yeah.
our fuel for growth. It's not just about us. So um
Yeah.
what areas in your life have you seen that be impactful? um Either way, this kickstand thing, like you said, it's kind of bi-directional. We're that for somebody, they're that for us. What ways has it really kind of made an impact in your life to be that for somebody as a leader?
I think about my workplace, and there's people that I work with where you can see the great. Put it this way: when you're receiving it from somebody, and somebody sees greatness in you
Mm-hmm.
and starts to draw that out and help you with that, it changes your perspective. So now I see it in other people. I'm like, man, there's so much more she could do. There's so much more he could do. And even at times, there's people I've worked with where they haven't seen it in themselves. And I'm encouraging them, man, I think you could do more. I think you could get promoted. I think if you did this, this, and this, and maybe these things aren't easy, but you can do it. If you could do these things, there's more opportunity for you. And I think uh, taking the time to have those conversations, the work will stack up during those conversations, but it is so worth it, even just from a leadership perspective, to take time to think about, maybe on the forefront, how could this person grow? What could I do to help them? And then present that. I've done that with a few people. Like, if you want to get to the next level, I'm willing to help you, but I need to know that you're invested in this as well. But here's how I could see your projection going. And a few people that they'd never thought of that before. And a few people, they're like, yeah, I've been thinking about that. And so I think that's how the flow is important, is it's received by me, absorbed, processed through, and then I get to see that in other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's really kind of leadership currency, if you will. Like, I mean, the fact that you're willing
Mm-hmm.
to invest in somebody, and you take that time, and then it kind of creates the ability and earns the right for you to speak into their life, walk alongside them, kind of disciple them in the workplace, if you will, and just kind of mentor them. And so I believe it creates that currency to just kind of expand, and you're able to do that throughout because other people are watching, right? They're watching
Yeah,
that. Oh, well, he sees something in Betty, so maybe he sees something in me, so maybe I need to step up my game a little bit, and it kind of becomes contagious. So I like that
yeah,
that point. So as we go through and talk about our wake, it's talking about our weakness. We've discussed our assets, our kickstand approach to leadership of being something for somebody else and helping them along the way, propping others up. So the last letter for wake is expectation. Um, that's a big word because that word can really become how we direct our course of action. Like, our expectations create not only create a vision of where we're going, but it can sort of muddy the waters uh, sometimes when we have a skewed expectation or an
mm,
unrealistic expectation. um, what affects that? Like, what affects the way that we expect something to be or happen, or our expectation of just what our world looks like? How can that
yeah,
kind of get us a little bit twisted?
yeah. To answer the question of what affects our expectation, gosh, I think like nearly almost everything, whether it's our upbringing impacts our expectation of ourselves or just what we see in the world. I think that the people that we surround ourselves with have a big voice in our expectations. I think our faith and what we believe in God, and this, maybe people that don't believe in God, just like the cosmic powers that be,
Mm,
or or whatever their sense of the greater thing in their life is, affects their expectations. Our the news outlets that we let into our
yeah,
mind, there's so many different
yeah,
factors. And I think for me, the challenging thing is which of those voices, because you can't completely shut a voice up. And it's really hard today in 2021 with news everywhere. And like, we let so many voices impact our mind. It's okay, which voice am I going to turn the volume up and make the loudest?
yeah,
Where, and that's a choice. For me, I chose that one, God and the Holy Spirit in me will be the loudest voice. And two, my wife and those people the people that are iron sharpening me, I want to give them an elevated voice. My parents certainly have an elevated voice in my life. And at different times, different people, their volume level has kind of gone up and down. But for me, the struggle is increasing my expectations, increasing my you know what I mean? and not just settling for good, but keeping that persistent drive for greatness.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a popular stance, popular posture sometimes is, I think we have that again. I go back to the comfort portion. We've expected certain things out of life, and we've relatively, we've hit those expectations, and then we feel like we're kind of done sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
man, I think God has way bigger plans, and I think you've said it a couple times, and I think it's important for the audience to understand, like, we've got to get closer to him, like continue to dig in and learn who he is and what he's trying to show us. And then I think a lot of things become clearer when we do that. Like if we're just sitting on the couch hoping that, it drops in our lap and, oh, here's what I'm supposed to be doing, or, oh, here's what great looks like. Maybe I should elevate my expectation. That's not going to happen. You've got to have an active role in this. You've got to be
Yeah.
listening and you've got to be seeking. So, I mean, those are great points. You know, have you ever, so talk about some of the ways, not only the evolution of your expectations, you mentioned just the people that have spoken into your life, but how have you sort of pushed the envelope and in yourself and really kind of stretched your expectations, and then how has God exceeded them?
Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking about this question in advance, and when I was thinking about how God has exceeded my expectations, it's almost like this constant progression to where I am today. I never would have thought I would be here 5 years ago,
Mhm.
but it's like a very robust way. Like I feel like family life, marriage life, work life, and even just the book and friends, and so I think it's this progression of like growing my expectations, but then God exceeds them. Um, but what I'll say is, as you grow with God, your obedience to what He says then has to grow, and your diligence to be obedient to His directing. Because I think what happens is we get this expectation of what we want to happen, and we want His result from His effort our way.
Uh-huh.
What I'm learning is that He wants His result through our effort His way. And I think sometimes we expect Him to do all the work or the hard stuff, and we still kind of want it our way. And learning, okay, God, I'm not going to do it my way. I'm going to work hard at doing it your way, and being diligent to that word, and being obedient to what He's asking us to do. And that, in the times where I feel like God has exceeded my expectations, I can point to, I can reflect upon, man, I truly was obedient to His word. And what's He saying in His word? That um, those who love discipline love
Mhm.
Him, or
Mhm.
that they're going to grow, that
Mhm.
they're His followers. If you love sometimes the discipline of God, and that discipline is sometimes He says, I want you to do it this way. And we have to have the discipline to do it that way, even if we don't want to.
Yeah.
Um, and if we could learn to be obedient like that, I was thinking about this. I was uh, thinking about Jericho, and when Joshua saw that fall, God gave him an extremely specific way and a really kind of weird way to see that happen.
Mhm.
And we think about, like, God, there's this wall in my life, and I want to see it crumble. And that wall can be anything.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm learning. Like, if I can just be obedient to the nth degree of what God has given me, then I think that's going to put me on a path to see like all of my expectations surpass, and I'll be walking in the full potential of what God has for me.
Yeah. Oh wow. I like that. I like that a lot. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking as an analogy of, if the audience can wrap their brain around this, like go to a really nice restaurant and we order the chef's special, but yet
Mm-hmm.
we want to go back where he's cooking this, and we want to tell him, no, not like that, you know. But we want the chef special. But let me just tell you what let me
Yeah,
make some adjustments,
yeah,
and then hurry up while you're at it. Like, so I think we
that's
get that way. I think we get that way
yes,
with God, right? Like, we want His
yeah,
special. We
yeah,
want what He's got, but then we want to kind of
yeah,
make adjustments and tell Him how we
yeah,
want it, and then
yeah,
when we want it. And so I think
yeah,
that's I'm thinking of this when you're
yeah.
talking. I'm thinking, man, have I done that a
Our
lot?
pastor once shared when Jesus said, "Ask, seek, and knock," that it's a progression. Asking is less of a task than seeking. You know, you got to
Mm,
go out and
yep.
find, and then knocking isn't even the next level. But Jesus never gave. He said, "You will be answered, you will find, and the door will be opened." But there's no timetable.
Yeah.
And you think about, I think what happens is people, going back to the Jericho analogy, we're on like lap 3, and we start to think, man, that wall, that hasn't moved in 3
Yeah.
days. This is silliness. I've been asking, I've been seeking, and we give up.
Yeah.
And we think, I'm going to attack it my way. I'm going to do it my way. Well, you were like halfway there.
Right.
Um,
And that's back to expectation. That's why I think impatience kind of goes hand in hand with that, and we want it on our time, so our expectation feels like it's just been completely obliterated. We've been let
yeah.
down because it hasn't happened. Our expectation was this, but God's time frame was this. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true. We get really kind of impatient and antsy and anxious. So um, those are good, man. I appreciate the insight today. Like, I appreciate this conversation, and what's our wake. Like, I think it's important to analyze what trail we're leaving. What is the collateral effects of our leadership, of just our way with our family, our workplace, our spiritual life. What's our wake? And I think if
Mm-hmm.
we get close enough and start examining the weaknesses, the assets, the kickstand of how we're propping others up, and then our expectations, if we really get in and dig in to the reality of those, I really think we're going to see a difference. And I think we're going to get closer to God along the way, because we're going to want to know what He says about it. We're going to want
Yeah.
to know what His guidance is, His direction is. And I think that's going to impact other people. So, Mark, it's been awesome, dude. Talk about
Yeah.
where we
Thank you
can
so
find.
much.
Yeah, tell us where we can get your book, The Potential Trap. And then maybe it sounds like you might have some thoughts of some things down the road that you might want to experience, or experiment with as far as your platforms go. Is there anything down the pike for you?
Yeah. So first, my book, The Potential Trap, you can find it on Amazon. You just search The Potential Trap. You can search my name, Mark Benedetti. Should come right to the top. A bright red cover. It's hard to miss. You can get it
Yeah.
on Amazon. It's in paperback, also in Kindle ebook. And I have somebody working on an audio book. It's not available yet, but I do have somebody working on that for me. Um, and then as far as, kind of what's next, noodling the idea of a second book, dealing on the concept of pressure that we were talking about. But also, being open to the direction and the leading of God. And it's been a wonderful journey thus far. And I was staying purposefully trying to stay singularly focused when I was writing it. People were asking me when I was writing it, well, how are you going to publish it? I was like, I'm not publishing mode yet. I'm in writing mode. Just going to
Mm,
write the thing. And I
yeah.
wrote it like, okay, now I'm going to figure out how to get it published. And that was a whole
Yeah.
journey in and of itself.
Right.
And
Right.
then it's like, okay, now I'm going to, I put all this work into it. I feel like it could help people. I feel like there's value in it, and people will find value in themselves reading it. So I'm just trying to, promote it and encourage it. We've done it at our church. Our young adults have done it as a Bible study, and so I developed Bible study curriculum associated with it,
Yeah.
leader studies, and all of that, and just trying to help people see the value in themselves, and hopefully this book helps them. And it helps them, get to escape what's trapping them, but then also maximize what they're going to do through
Yeah.
God working in them in this life. So,
Yeah.
I'm excited about it, John. Thank you so much for sharing your platform and
Yeah.
having me on your show. It's been a privilege, and so I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm excited to see what God has next for
That's cool. Yeah, you're on a journey, I can tell, and I can tell you're
him.
just getting started. So, hey, audience, I hope you were blessed as I was by this. I hope you got a few things practically that you can walk today, you can start doing today, and man, I hope you got stronger. I hope you became a better leader than when you first sat down. So, with that, he's been Mark Benedetti, and we've been Last in Line. Be blessed.